Are you concerned that this move, the tariffs this week, could push some of the United States' closest allies to work with China?
No, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. Yeah.
Mr. President, can I ask you
I
about
think
something?
they have a chance of doing better, actually, with the tariffs. It can actually help them in a certain way. And I think a lot of them will drop their tariffs because, you know, they've been unfairly tariffing the United States for years. And if you look at the European Union on cars, the European Union already dropped their tariff down to 2.5%. It was announced a couple of days ago, which is what which is a very small tariff. The United States charged very little. And a lot of, I think I heard that India just a little while ago is going to be dropping its tariffs very substantially. And I said, why didn't somebody do this a long time ago? A lot of countries are going to be dropping their tariffs.
About something that happened in France today, Mr. President. Marine Le Pen, the far-right leader, got convicted in court and is now banned from running for office for 5 years. Do you have a comment about
That's
that?
a big deal. That's a very big deal. I know all about it, and a lot of people thought she wasn't going to be convicted of anything, and I don't know if it means conviction, but she was banned for running for 5 years, and she's the leading candidate. That sounds like this country.
In a surprising turn of events, India could face difficulties and the consequences of US tariff threats if it continues to purchase Russian oil. This follows US President Donald Trump's warning to Russia and the growing frustration in Washington over the slow pace of peace talks between President Trump and his Russian counterpart, President Vladimir Putin, particularly over the ongoing war in Ukraine. Trump's latest remarks on secondary tariffs have raised alarm in India, a country that has seen its Russian oil imports soar in recent months. This could directly impact India, which has become one of Russia's biggest oil buyers since Western sanctions began crippling Moscow's energy exports. Indian refiners, who have been importing the Russian oil in large quantities, are now left uncertain about the consequences of these US tariffs, especially after Trump's threat to Russia. India has sharply increased its oil imports from Russia in recent months. According to provisional data from the commodity market analytics firm, India's Russian oil imports averaged 1.85 million barrels per day, that is BPD, in March, significantly up from February's 1.47 million BPD and January's 1.64 million BPD. Russian crude oil currently accounts for over 30% of India's total oil import share. Despite the growing dependence on Russian oil, India has been clear in its stance. The country will not purchase oil that is under sanctions or involving third parties facing sanctions. India has long avoided buying oil from Iran due to US sanctions, and even its Venezuelan oil purchases have been managed through sanctions exemptions granted by the US to certain companies. While industry watchers are not yet expecting the full impact of Trump's tariff threats to materialize, the possibility of secondary sanctions could force Indian refiners to stop buying Russian oil. If this happens, India will likely turn back to its traditional suppliers in West Asia, including countries such as Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The immediate disruption could lead to short-term challenges, but analysts believe that the situation will stabilize in the medium term. However, oil remains a critical import for India, topping the list of its merchandise imports by value. India's economy, from energy costs to inflationary pressures, heavily depend on the stability of oil prices. A shift from Russian crude to other suppliers will likely involve price adjustments, and although alternative sources are available, the impact could ripple through various sectors. One oil analyst noted, and I quote, "It's extremely unlikely that Indian refiners will persist with Russian crude imports if the US imposes tariffs. A quick shift to suppliers like Saudi Arabia and Iraq is likely to replace the lost Russian oil volumes." As the US prepares for the imposition of reciprocal tariffs on the 2nd of April, Indian officials are still seeking clarity. While the United States has made it clear that all countries will be affected by the tariffs, Indian negotiators had hoped for an exemption due to the ongoing trade talks. Trump's confirmation that all countries would face the new tariffs comes as a blow, leaving Indian industry anxious. In recent discussions, US negotiators have not provided much detail on the scope or nature of these tariffs. There are also concerns in India that the reciprocal tariffs could be used as leverage to negotiate better access to US goods in Indian markets. In particular, sectors such as automobiles, whiskey, and agricultural products are of interest to US negotiators. Meanwhile, India's trade negotiations with the United States have been ongoing, with talks aimed at determining the scope of a trade agreement. The 4-day discussions, which concluded on Saturday, focused on ironing out the terms of reference, that's the TOR, for a potential bilateral trade agreement. However, there's growing concern in India that these talks may stall, especially as the United States negotiators have not provided full clarity on reciprocal tariffs. Economists and trade experts believe that if two countries cannot agree on terms quickly, tariff-based negotiations might drag on longer than expected. Some sources within the Indian government are worried that the US could use these tariffs as a bargaining chip to push for market access for US goods. With the looming threat of the tariffs and the ongoing trade talks, India's oil refining sector faces a period of uncertainty. Indian officials are trying to gauge the exact scope of the proposed tariffs and the secondary sanctions. Questions are abound about how these measures could affect both India's energy security and its broader economic interests. In the coming weeks, much will depend on how the United States and India resolve their trade differences and whether President Trump follows through with his threats regarding Russian oil. So far, what's clear is that India's oil imports from Russia and its broader trade relationship with the United States will be the key issues in months ahead. As tensions rise and tariffs loom, India's next steps will be critical in determining how it navigates this complex geopolitical and geo-economic challenge. For more updates on Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, stay tuned to the official YouTube channel of the Indian Express.